The National Desk, America's News Now.
The Israeli war against Hamas is in its second week as U.S. troops prepare to help, signaling the length of the conflict could be long.
This will be a long war. The price will be high, but we are going to win.
The U.S. House has been idle for 2 weeks, but with a speaker vote scheduled, some on the right have growing optimism they could get their House back in order.
We will have a Speaker of the House either tomorrow or the next day, and I think that Jim will be the next Speaker of the House.
And another inmate escaped. We're going to tell you who is on the run and from where. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. As we come on the air tonight, the U.S. military readying roughly 2,000 troops for potential deployment to Israel. U.S. defense officials said they have selected the individuals who they will send in support of the country in non-combat roles, namely in advising. It's not clear under what circumstances they'd be deployed, but it signals the U.S. is ready to support Israeli troops as they gear up for a likely ground incursion into Gaza. This as bombs continue to rain down on the Palestinian territory, dramatically pushing up the death toll in Gaza. The death toll right now doubling in the last few days. 2,800 people killed in the Palestinian territory so far, 10,000 wounded. In Israel, the death toll has also risen, 1,400 killed, 3,900 wounded. Also, the latest update on the numbers in terms of U.S. citizens who have died there, rising to 30. 13 more remain unaccounted for. Americans once stranded in Israel have begun leaving the country. Today, the U.S. Embassy offering 2,500 Americans and their immediate family members the chance to leave by sea, evacuating them to nearby Cyprus. However, in Gaza, the nearly 600 Americans estimated there remain stuck. Told by the State Department they'll have to wait until the Rafah border crossing with Egypt, the opening of which is being negotiated right now, has been cleared for passage. When it will reopen remains unclear. This is the humanitarian crisis in Gaza turns dire. Palestinians have been under a blockade by Israel for over a week now, blocked from accessing food, fuel, medical supplies, and electricity until 199 Israelis that Hamas took hostage in their attack are released. After pressure from the U.S. over the weekend, Israel reportedly began allowing water to flow in some areas of South Gaza. Meantime, all eyes are on tensions at the border of Israel and Lebanon after intensifying clashes with Hezbollah. You're looking at video of IDF troops amassed near that border right now as U.S. officials work to mitigate a regional escalation.
We haven't seen any firm indications that Hezbollah has decided to go all in here and truly open up a second front for the IDF. But we're watching this closely. That's one of the reasons why, of course, we've moved military assets in the region to make it clear to any would-be actor that might want to get involved and broaden this conflict that they shouldn't do it.
Looking to urge Arab partners to put pressure on Hamas and Hezbollah, Secretary of State Antony Blinken has spent the last 4 days in the Middle East, today making a second visit to Israel. But here's a look at where Blinken has been since Thursday. 7 different countries, including Jordan, Egypt, and the Gulf nations. As Blinken navigates diplomacy abroad, the Senate plans to reunite this week to pass an assistance package for Israel. But without a speaker, the House cannot act. Our Atra El-Nashar has the latest on what the aid package could look like.
The Biden administration working on a multi-billion-dollar security package with Israel top of mind.
I guarantee we're going to provide them everything they need.
National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says the package will be significantly higher than the previously reported $2 billion price tag and include aid for Ukraine. Bundled too may be funding for the U.S. southern border and Taiwan. The Senate back in Washington this week, ready to move quickly.
Very soon we're going to put together a very strong package. We will pass it soon. We're not going to wait for the House.
The House, where Republicans haven't figured out who among them can get the 217 votes needed to be Speaker. let alone decide if Israel funding should be a standalone bill or tied to other security needs.
At this point, Margaret, we're having a hard time keeping the House floor open.
Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz, who led the push to oust former Speaker Kevin McCarthy that put House Republicans in this position, argues there's no rush.
There is no need expressed by Israel that the United States has not been able to meet.
Also in question, what will U.S. support for Israel look like long term? Will support for funding Israel fade away, as it has for Ukraine, among Republicans in Congress and in public opinion polls? The president pushing back when asked if funding Israel and Ukraine is more than the U.S. can take on.
We're the United States of America, for God's sake. We can take care of both of these and still maintain our overall international defense.
Now, hopes the crisis in Israel and Gaza would expedite the House Speaker race just haven't panned out. Now, Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan, who chairs the Judiciary Committee, did win a simple majority from his conference behind closed doors last week. He is flipping holdouts every hour, but he's still short of the 217 votes needed to be Speaker. We'll see just how many he has left to sway tomorrow when the House, the full House, takes a vote on this.
Yes, all eyes will be following tomorrow. And today, President Biden canceled a trip to Colorado to focus on national security calls. What do we know right now about a potential visit from Biden to Israel?
Yeah, it's been widely reported that the president is considering a trip to Israel in the coming days. Benjamin Netanyahu has extended an invitation to Biden, and we've seen his defense secretary, the Secretary of State, twice go to Israel. But this is a huge security undertaking for the Secret Service. Sending a president of the United States to a war zone where there are not U.S. troops is just a huge, huge undertaking, similar to what we saw when the president went to Ukraine to meet with President Volodymyr Zelensky there. So it's very possible that, like the Ukraine trip, if the president does go to Israel, we likely wouldn't learn about it until he's either already there or on his way.
The stakes are growing higher by the day. Atril Nashar reporting for us from D.C. Thank you as always. And you are taking a look at a picture right now released by the White House recently of the president meeting with his security team just hours ago. Heavy strategizing underway, as Atril was just referring to. This is a day after a 60-minute interview in which Biden warned that a complete occupation of Gaza by Israel would be, quote, a big mistake. Meantime, on Capitol Hill tonight, House Oversight Chairman James Comer says he has, quote, significant evidence the president mishandled classified documents held at his Penn Biden Center. Chairman Comer is asking for interviews and documents from special counsel Robert Hur to, quote, evaluate whether our national security has been compromised. House Republicans continue an impeachment inquiry into President Biden, but as of yet have not shown any direct links between him and the alleged crimes. A suspect is now in custody after an airport parking garage shooting that killed a Philadelphia police officer and hurt another last week. The officers were shot after they saw several people breaking into a car. Police say they arrested the 18-year-old suspect in New Jersey this morning, but they believe 3 more people were involved. Investigators are still gathering evidence at this point. In Georgia, the search is on for 4 inmates who escaped from the Bibb County Detention Center early this morning. Among them is Joey Fournier, being held on a murder charge, plus 3 others arrested for aggravated assault, firearm possession, and drug trafficking. The 4 escaped through a damaged window in the center and then crawled out of a hole in the courtyard fence there. Authorities say they drove away in a blue Dodge Challenger. Well, the government could soon be banned from separating parents and children at the southern border for 8 years. A new settlement filed today between the Biden administration and the American Civil Liberties Union would temporarily prohibit a zero-tolerance immigration policy seen under President Trump, in which families were separated for long periods of time. The settlement also includes benefits like helping immigrants get work. A judge still needs to approve it at this point. Rite Aid, one of the largest pharmacy chains in the United States, has filed for bankruptcy. The chain has been dealing with slowing sales, higher debt, and lawsuits related to the opioid epidemic. Rite Aid officials say they made a deal with creditors to close stores that aren't performing well. Right now, the company operates more than 2,000 locations, mostly on the East and West coasts. And just hours ago, former President Trump barred from making statements targeting prosecutors, potential witnesses, or the judge's staff in the D.C. 2020 election interference case. Judge Tanya Chutkan imposed the gag order, making clear Trump can still make general criticisms of the DOJ and state his view that the case is politically motivated. Coming up, threats to Muslim and Jewish communities are on the rise. What officials are saying about possible attacks on American soil. Then, the House is preparing to vote for a new speaker, but there could still be a long road ahead, a compromise some Democrats are suggesting as patience wears thin. Then we've long known about toxic heavy metals in baby food, and now one state has taken things into its own hands after the FDA failed to address the problem. A man charged with the murder of a Muslim boy in Plainfield, Illinois, is being held without bond right now. Prosecutors say Joseph Zuba stabbed 6-year-old Palestinian refugee Wadia Al-Fayoumi and his mother on Saturday. The boy's funeral took place this afternoon. His mother still in the hospital recovering. The Justice Department is investigating the attack as a hate crime. Police saying that every indication is pointing to this crime being motivated by Islamophobia amid the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict. Zuba due back in court on the 30th. And in New York, police are looking for this man who they say attacked a bus passenger yesterday. He allegedly punched the 19-year-old victim and tried to take off his turban. The NYPD are looking into that as a hate crime. Meanwhile, the terror attacks in Israel have American law enforcement concerned about copycat attacks in the U.S. Here's national correspondent Kayla Gaskins with more.
With tensions rising in the Middle East, the head of the FBI warning of possible attacks on U.S. soil related to the Hamas terror attacks on Israel.
In this heightened environment, there's no question we're seeing an increase in reported threats, and we've got to be on the lookout, especially for lone actors who may take inspiration from recent events to commit violence of their own.
Christopher Wray's warning Saturday came a day after a Hamas-backed global day of jihad, which didn't result in widespread violence, but had some like New York Mayor Eric Adams calling for extra attention from law enforcement.
We must remain vigilant. We have directed the NYPD to deploy additional resources to our schools and houses of worship.
The Middle East conflict also causing renewed concerns of U.S. border security. U.S. Customs and Border Protection reportedly says they've arrested 4 Iranians who are considered special interest aliens so far this month. CBP uses that label to identify non-U.S. citizens who potentially pose a national security risk.
We do know that there are actual threats coming into the United States across the southern border.
CBP data shows this year alone, 153 on the nation's terror watch list were caught trying to enter the country via the southern border. That's more than the previous 6 years combined.
So you see this dramatic upswing in terrorist individuals, at least on those watch lists, having entered the country in just the first couple of years of the Biden administration, not accounting for people who weren't intercepted that might be coming in.
Director Wray says threats against Muslim and Jewish communities are both up. The FBI also working with joint terrorism task forces to identify and address any possible danger. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins for the National Desk, America's News Now.
We'll go to the floor tomorrow. It's not about pressuring anybody, it's just about we got to have a speaker.
Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan, the probable Republican nominee for Speaker of the House, says the House will vote for the new Speaker tomorrow at noon. It has been 2 weeks since 8 Republicans and all Democrats deposed former Speaker Kevin McCarthy, and the chamber has since been sitting idle. Congressman Jordan, who currently chairs the House Judiciary Committee, has been picking up Republican support heading into tomorrow's vote, but still faces an uphill battle for that 217 that he needs to move forward. Jordan can only afford to lose 4 votes to win the gavel. Congressman Steve Womack says patience is wearing thin, and sooner or later a compromise will need to be made.
Nobody in America can get 217 right now out of the Republican conference. If that becomes apparent to everybody, then at some point in time we're going to have to work across the aisle, try to figure out what it's going to take for us to be able to get a speaker elected and then get the ball rolling in Congress once again.
And one compromise being floated by some Democrats is to vote to expand the powers of Speaker Pro Tem Patrick McHenry to allow him to call for specific legislation tied to government spending, including aid to Israel and Ukraine, as well as the necessary bills to keep government funded as the new deadline of November 17th approaches with no speaker in place. Happening today, Ford Motor Company Executive Chairman Bill Ford addressing the ongoing UAW strikes in a speech about the future of American manufacturing. Chairman Ford says the work stoppages are impacting the company's ability to develop new vehicles and invest in its future. Ford also said Toyota, Honda, Tesla, and Chinese companies will continue to benefit as the strikes persist, and called on the UAW to agree to a resolution.
We need to come together to bring an end to this acrimonious round of talks. I still believe in a bright future, one that we can build together. I still believe the automobile industry is a major force for good in our country.
Meanwhile, in Canada, Unifor, the Canadian UAW equivalent, ratified the contract between the union and General Motors, averting a strike there. Only Stellantis is without a deal in place in Canada, but there have been no work stoppages. Miami Marlins general manager Kim Ange, Major League Baseball's first and only female GM, will not return to the club next year, despite the Marlins making the playoffs this year. The Marlins offered her new contract, but she did not accept it, citing a difference of opinion with the team's owner on how to reshape the baseball operations department. Meanwhile, San Francisco Giants coach Alyssa Naken, also the first female coach in baseball, becoming the first woman to interview to be a manager in the league. The Giants held their first round of interviews last week. Naken has coached with the team since 2020. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter most to you. We are taking the pulse of America.
Hitting the 395 express lanes.
Going to try to drive just a little bit faster.
Virginia Tech Transportation Institute is showcasing its autonomous vehicles like this one.
We hope to take this vehicle as a research platform moving forward to be able to help identify where best practices and standards could be applied to maybe make some of these solutions come to fruition on production vehicles.
After more than 3 years, they're finally putting the driverless cars on the roads to demonstrate how it all works.
What frankly are somewhat everyday common occurrences that we just take for granted that we as humans can find our way through. It's a little bit more challenging for an automated vehicle that is always trying to follow the rules.
Demonstrating scenarios like what happens when a police officer pulls you over or if a car breaks down in front of you. It's part of an effort to bring education to the public, as recent polls show the public doesn't quite trust driverless cars.
The videos of the conflict that are making their rounds right now can be hard to process. Psychiatrist Jason Miller says that they can be triggering, especially for former military personnel.
Unfortunately, I think there are so many people in our country, either because of their military service, their own experiences with war-torn countries, or their family ties and cultural ties to Israel. There's so many people who are going to be taking this personally.
Miller says it's possible that these sights and sounds can trigger PTSD symptoms in combat veterans.
There's 1.9 million Americans who served in the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. With that many people who have been deployed to battle environments, seeing the news footage of another battle in another war in a Middle Eastern country certainly is going to be triggering to those folks.
Bowie State University students are being greeted with extra security as they return to campus today after an October 7th on-campus shooting that left 2 men hurt. There are police patrols now, added gate security, and license plate readers. There will soon be card access for all buildings and facial recognition systems. The school is also considering AI weapons detection.
We're taking all measures. We want our campus safe. Students come here to learn, earn degrees. That's what we want them to focus on, not to be concerned about their safety. So we're taking all measures necessary.
Well, coming up, a possible breakthrough to force standards in the baby food industry after the news came out about toxic heavy metal contamination. Stay with us. More than 2 years ago, Spotlight on America exposed toxic heavy metals in baby food and the FDA's failure to address the problem. Now, as Lisa Fletcher reports, one state is taking matters into its own hands.
The news shocked parents around the country. The baby foods they depended on to nourish their infants, dangerously contaminated.
It felt uncomfortable to know that brands that we trust that are in the store aren't so trustworthy after all.
Known health hazards like lead, arsenic, and cadmium in the very jars given to our most vulnerable triggered a congressional investigation and countless headlines after leading scientists sounded the alarm. Ellipse Analytics CEO Sean Callan, who first blew the whistle 6 years ago, recently shared his lab's latest baby food test results with Spotlight on America. More than 300 baby food products were analyzed and compared to the same foods tested in 2017.
Between 2017 and 2023, the proportion of the category that we are able to detect heavy metals remains the same.
Basically, the same percentage of baby foods contaminated in 2017 are still contaminated today. Roughly 20% have what Callan says would be considered high levels of lead. But it's not all bad news. Callan says tests show a good portion of manufacturers have made modest improvements.
The worst products are still just about as bad as they were before, but everybody else seems to be trending in the right direction. And it'll be really exciting to see how this new law impacts that.
That would be California Assembly Bill 899, unanimously passed and signed by Governor Newsom just days ago. It is the first major law to set strict standards for baby foods. California Assemblymember Al Murasucci is the architect of the bill.
Leading scientists have been trying to make changes to the industry, health organizations, members of Congress, and nobody's been able to get it done. Are you the guy who's going to get this done?
Well, I'm hoping that not only myself, but the state of California. California often leads the country in terms of fighting for consumer protections.
Starting in January, baby food makers will be required to test a representative sample of their products for toxic elements once a month, and by 2025, disclose those results.
I think it goes to show that when things don't happen in Washington, D.C., states can continue to act, and California is doing so, but there's no absence for the need for federal action.
Something U.S. Representative Raja Krishnamurthy has been pushing for since 2021, when he led a subcommittee investigation that exposed stunning problems in the baby food industry and anemic action by the FDA.
We have to make sure that at the federal level, we do what it takes to provide uniform standards throughout the country.
Krishnamurthy will reintroduce the Baby Food Safety Act, which would set maximum levels for heavy metals and require companies to test their final products for total levels of contaminants and disclose those test results. It would also give the FDA authority under the law to recall products that don't meet standards.
It's good to have legislation in place so that whether it's a Democratic or Republican administration, they're following what the American people want, which is they want food for their kids that is free of toxins.
For Spotlight on America, I'm Lisa Fletcher.
Flag football enthusiasts, in 5 years, you could be an Olympian. The International Olympic Committee officially voted to allow flag football for the first time into the 2028 Olympics. The United States, as the host country, and 5 other nations will take part in the tournament. Other events were also added for the 28 Olympics, including cricket, softball, lacrosse, and even squash. How exciting is that? We love to see the diversification there. That does it for this edition of the National Desk. I'm Amira David. Thanks for watching.